What's going on, guys? Logan JYA here, and I've got a deck that I once again thought I would never have in my own possession. But now that it's been hit on the ban list, I think it's actually pretty fun to play around with, and we've got a pretty unique take on it. However, this deck's not going to be legal until March, so once that Maze set comes out, you're going to be able to play this deck at its full capacity. Without further ado, let's dive into it. You read the title, you already know what it be. We've got Tier Elements ready to rock and roll. The person behind the camera right now is my boy CJ Daniels, who helped me do a lot of work on this list, so I hope you guys enjoy it. All right, and also half the cards in this deck are his too.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Do it now.
All of that good stuff. All right, let's get started with the main board. So for the tier names, you just do 2 Rhinoheart, and then one of all of the ones that are at 1. No surprises there. Shout out Theo for the core. He's the reason why I put together this deck. Then we got 3 copies of Tier Kashtira. Oh yeah, 3 copies of Fenrir to go with it. You kind of have to play this in this build, and you'll see why. It's very important. Another thing I want to add about this build is that this is an all-gas version of it. We're 40 cards, no going second cards in the main inherently. So the theory would be that you break boards with engine. However, if you were going to play going second cards, you probably want to play 6. You'd want to make it 3 Nibiru's, 3 Book of Eclipse is what I'm thinking. If you disagree, let me know in the comments down below. And, you know, there are certain slots in here where it's like, you know, 1 Fenrir, that's one way you can make a little bit more room in the main board. But likely, you would end up at 45 cards if you were to put in those going second cards in the main. Just saying. All right, let's continue on. The one-ofs for all the Ishizus, of course you're still going to play them. Why would you not?
They're still broken.
They're still insane. Follow it up with 3 copies of King of the Swamp. This is, you have to play because that's how you get into some of your best fusions since Kit Kalos is banned. Only play 1 Diviner, and there's a reason for that. We're actually playing other normal summons instead of it because of one of our main core strategies for this, and those other normal summons include Dark Refer and Armageddon Knight. Obviously, you can use these to send any of your dark tier names, or you can send Destrudo. And the reason why Destrudo is so insane, obviously we're playing 2 different field spells for the 2 different engines, those being Kashtira and Tier Elements, and we've got, this is why I said it's not going to be really great until March, Ancient Fairy Dragon. You'll see that in the extra deck, but that's one of the core strategies that we're employing with this build. Play the 1 copy of Shaddoll Beast for Winda access, theoretically. You could also cut this, and you could cut the Winda in the extra if you didn't want to play it, and that would give you some additional room in the main as well, but something just to think about. I think it might be worth to play. Again, with this deck, it's very mill dependent. How you play it out is going to depend on your mills. It's a lot like trying to play Adamancipator nowadays, or after they hit Block Dragon. It's just whatever you hit is how you kind of rock and roll with your hand, but there are certain combo lines that are good to know.
Just full send it, right?
Just full send it.
Exactly.
Just full send
Let's
it.
go.
All right, moving on into the spells, we got 3 copies of Planet and then 2 copies of the other planet. I was originally only going to play 1, but the gentleman behind the camera, CJ, said, nah, it's important to play 2 because you're either going to mill it or you want to really see just 1 other one. So these combined with the terraforming, you've got 6 field spells in your deck, and it's pretty easy to see. So that is what we're doing with that. 2 copies of Scream, 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods, the 1 regular Foolish Burial, obviously. These are all pretty mandatory. The 1 Rhoda, this searches Rhinoheart, Armageddon Knight, or Dark Refer. 1 copy of Polly to go with the King of the Swamp, so you have something you can actually search with it. And this is a great card to hold for when you're going, either hold or use when you're going second, just to get into Guardian Chimera, which is really, really good. And then finally, the trap cards that we main. I'm doing 2 Sulliek and 1 Meta Noise. However, gentleman CJ prefers to do 3 Sulliek. And CJ, what do you think about the traps?
So the traps are still broken. They're pretty much like your go-to, where it's like if you're trying to mill, you really want to mill these because that searches your names. I am playing 3 Sulliek over the Meta Noise because I feel like when your end board with a Sulliek is already strong enough to beat the Kashtira matchup, while it's playing into your board. It's just crazy the boards that this puts up, and I think Logan's gonna, when he shows you the extra deck, he'll show you like what the possibilities can be.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
you could play Meta Noise if you really wanted to, if you want more a little comfort zone.
Yeah.
But I just choose not to because, you know, I'm just a rebel.
and my logic behind the Meta Noise here is, of course, it's very strong against Kashtira with the Book of Moon effect, as well as the fact that it lets you send from grave and get that additional fuse if you set it up properly. I just like having that option. So that is my take on that. Also, sometimes when you have the Foolish Burial Goods, you prefer to have the add back than the search. Just occasionally that can come up.
And you said we're at 40 in the main, right?
40 in the main with this build.
Yeah, like you said before, you could play stuff that's like going second. You could play up to 45 because usually if your turn goes out almost perfect, you're going to mill anywhere between 10 to 18 cards, I think it was the max.
Yeah.
So you have a good chance of seeing names, seeing cards you want in your graveyard. But the going second cards also just have other utility-wise. Like, I mean, Nib is just a crazy card right now.
Right.
You could play things like Lava Golem. You could play things like Book of Eclipse, because you could break through a board very easily. Because as you all know, Tier summons very big boss monsters for no reason. So running over things and beating over stuff that are set by Book of Eclipse is not hard.
Agreed. All right, let's get into the extra deck. Of course, playing, and I also want to say this extra deck kind of disrespects Kashtira, as in we're not playing 2-ofs of important cards, but at the same time, it's like, if they just hit one card, you just pivot to whatever you have left, is the logic. So the one Rukalos, the one Kaleido Heart, the one Winda, the one Guardian Chimera, the one Grapha Fusion, one Predaplant, and one Mud Dragon for the fusions. The ones that I would say are definitely mandatory are these ones over here are mandatory in my eyes, and these ones are a bit more optional. However, another case could be made to play Garura in this space. Just things to think about, but this is how I'm currently playing with the lineup. And then Link monsters play very few. The one Sprind, the one Cherubini, for those of you who are unaware, obviously Pack has already talked about it, but you do the Dracosack play, and that lines up a King of the Swamp as well as the Sprind for an insta-fuse into Rukalos. And then the last Link monster we're playing is Cross Sheep. You saw that the Diviner is a 1-of in the main deck, and normally without Sprite Elf, you'd think there's not really an easy way to bring it back. However, if you fuse when you have this on field, it does let you summon back a monster from grave, and that can also trigger your Diviner. So if you mill it, you can actually make it live just like that. So I think Cross Sheep is the perfect one.
You could summon Fenrir, you could summon
Armageddon Knight.
Armageddon Knight. It helps you get into so much, and it's one of those things that kind of like fills the slot for Sprite Elf. I mean, nothing really ever will.
Yeah.
But like this being able to report anything gets you there. Yeah.
And then, of course, the big card that I really want to talk about and what makes this build in particular possible,
rich guy over here.
no, Broken Desperate, is the Ancient Fairy Dragon. It's so cool. We're going to have its Errated effect, which is still insanely strong with the special summoning from hand searching other field spells. So obviously we're playing 2 different versions. You can get away with it.
Damn, it's crazy. The ghost is going to be fake because it's going to be Errated, so you can't use it. Bye.
Oh my gosh, get out of here. And finally, one Barone for the Synchros. This comes up a ton. You'd think that we have actually multiple tuners. We've got the Diviner as well as the Destrudo, and there are times where you can line up the Destrudo depending on the levels that you modulate, getting it to be a level 3, and then syncing it off with a Kashtira Tier Element, and then that gives you Barone, just like that.
Kashtira Tier Element, you could use Fenrir.
Yep.
There's a million ways that you can summon Barone in this deck, and it's kind of wild.
Yeah, and this is just one of the most fun buildable decks that you can really play. And then finally for the Exceeds, one Zeus, one Redoer, and then the one Mecha Beast Dracosack for the combos. I don't have a side deck for this build right now because as of time of recording, it's not currently legal to play in a tournament. However, I highly encourage you all to give it some testing and really have a lot of fun with it. I want to do one thing before we wrap up here, and that's a quick test hand, and then that'll be it. So let's get into that. Alright guys, here we are back in the lab to share not 1 but 2 different test hands with Tier Elements for March of 2023. Again guys, I want to really flag that, in my opinion, Tier is more of a for fun deck, or a very decent rogue strategy at best that is extremely RNG reliant. Your results will vary. Like I said in the video, I compared it to Adamancipators. I think that's the closest comparison we have at this current point in time, and that holds true for this particular build. But the combos I'm going to show you are definitely a good demonstration of what this deck can do when things go right, and also shows off some of the unique plays that we can do with some of the engines we've put in here. But without further ado, let's dive into the first replay. Alright guys, test hand number 1, we're starting off with really strong hand. I go for the planet here, the Kashtira field spell. Since I'd rather hold off and get the Pellegrino a little bit later on in the play with our Ancient Fairy Dragon. So of course here we start off with the Fenrir line. I'm going to grab a second copy of Fenrir here just so we can use it with our Tier Elements Kashtira. That's going to give us a free mill 3 and end up hitting a Sulliek here. Again, like I said, RNG. Sulliek here is going to grab a copy of Skirin. We're going to take advantage of that later. And then we can go Rhoda. I'm actually going to choose to go for the Dark Refer a little early here. Another option could be Rhinoheart, but since we don't have another tier thing in hand to discard for it, I think going for the Dark Refer here makes a little bit of sense. It's going to serve as an extender and as a means of dumping that Destrudo in our hand into the graveyard. But here, next step, I'm going to go for the Skirin because we do have a good amount of advantage to generate here. So we'll mill 3 and got some really good hits here. Again, your results will vary, but at worst, we were still triggering the Shaddoll Beast to draw, but here we do get the Scream, the Havness, as well as the Beast. So we're going to be be able to draw a card, then fuse here. Again, usually a safe practice is to go for the Grapha Fusion first, because it's going to protect up your second fuse play, which we do have lined up here, and then the Scream here will add the Sulliek. So moving on from here, we can then link to here. I'm actually using the Cross Sheep here. You could see this as an unnecessary step, but I want to show you how far we can push the boards. That's why I ended up going for it here. I pitch the Destrudo just to special summon the Dark Grepher, and then use its effect, paying half, and then summoning it back from the graveyard. Not using Dark Grepher's effect to take a dump, we're just using it as a free extender here to get us into the Ancient Fairy Dragon. So here, Ancient Fairy can then blow up the planet, and even post-errata, it can grab us a copy of the Tearfield spell. That is going to be what searches us our Rhino Heart, and then we can continue to play on here, overlay these two guys for the Draco Sack, and you guys may already know this play. You get the tokens, you go for the Cherubini right there, and that is going to let you send another copy of King of the Swamp, and then we can link into the Sprite Sprint, which is a free dump for Merly, once again giving us an additional fuse, and that fuse can be used to bring out the Rukalos. So here, put back the Merly, put back the King of the Swamp, get out that beautiful Rukalos, and we are not necessarily done yet, because we have that Cross Sheep effect, since we did just Fusion Summon to a zone it points to, can bring back that Skirin from earlier, then normal summon the Rhino Heart in hand. I'm not going to use its effect to fuse here, or to send from deck to grave. It doesn't really matter in this situation, so instead I just use it as the last body, since we haven't normal summoned yet, put it out to make the Time Thief Redoer. We can set that Sulliek we searched earlier, and we've got multiple layers of interruption. Let me show you. So we've got the Sprint that is currently live for the removal, since we have the Redoer on field, and if we don't want to use it for that, we are going to get the Redoer Snatch off the top of the opponent's deck, and we can use it to trigger a fuse with our Skirin, and that, since we have a Rhino Heart in rotation, get us Kaleido, and we also have Tier Element Sulliek that we searched earlier. We've got the Grapha Fusion live as an Omni-Negate, the Rukalos to negate a summon, and the Pellegrino is live for a pop when we go for the Skirin fuse, or since we have the Medora Shuffler in grave, we could trigger it that way as well with the Tier Element Kashtira that we have in grave. So again, there is multiple layers of interruption to this board. Now, was this very RNG based? Absolutely, but we did get to see a piece of each of those engine components coming in and contributing something to the end board. Do I think this is a Tier 1 strategy? Absolutely not. Is there maybe a different way to play Tier that pushes it further? Possibly, but this is what we came up with in our wheelhouse. If you have different ideas that are going to push this deck even further beyond, get it back to its glory days, please leave them in the comments down below. I want to show you guys one more test hand, and then we'll bring this to a close. Alright guys, the last test hand I'm going to show you is another demonstration, and this time we play a little bit more conservatively, not trying to leverage all of the engines we have in here, but instead just trying to work with the pieces we have in hand and put up the most competent board with the mills that are presented to us. So here, again, starting off with Fenrir. Like I said, Fenrir is one of those lifeblood engines of the build here. Then we go for the King of the Swamp, take a dump. Foolish is going to put the Sulliek in grave, and lining up those Sullieks in grave is actually very important with the Foolish Burial Goods, because it also gives you a very free and easy banish with your Tier Elements Kashtira to summon itself and get those mills, and maybe even set up your Draco Sack plays. But since we have the King of the Swamp, the opening hand, we can normal summon the Rhino Heart here before proceeding any further and get our free fuse for our safety net. That's a cool thing about certain hands with this deck. You are going to be able to put up the safety net early. So that lets us put out the Grapha Fusion. Like I said, usually this is your better bet as your first fuse, because it can protect the remainder of your plays with an Omni Negate. So that protects you from Imperm. Problem being is it doesn't negate and destroy. It just changes the effect to make you discard a card. But we've got plenty of live targets for that in hand. Next thing, like I said earlier, we're going to banish that Sulliek. That's going to bring out the Tier Cash. Mill 3, get some good hits here, including the Scream and the Tier Cash. So it's going to be a search for 1 and a mill, another 2. Hit a Kelbeck, of course, like I said, RNG, baby. We love it when it works out. Hit a Skirin, that fuses with the King of the Swamp, giving us our second fuse. And since we hit off that second fuse on the RNG mills, there was no reason to go for the Draco Sack line. Instead, just leaving a thick board of monsters on field, as well as taking advantage of the trap cards that we had in our hand. There's no reason to push it further, in my opinion. Now, leaving out on this board, it looks like it's a little bit clogged, but even if we were hit with something like Lava Golem, we would still have plenty of bodies on board to, at the very least, leverage our trap cards, or have the Fenrir as an additional line of interruption, the Omni Negate with the Grapha. We've got the Rukalos for the summon negations, and then the Meta Noise will also give us access to an additional fuse. Rhino Heart's in rotation, which means we can take advantage of this and another Aqua somewhere in rotation to bring a Kaleido Heart if that was what we wanted to do, and we've got the Sulliek for the negates. So this is playing it a little bit more conservatively, and knowing when is enough is really a key paramount thing you want to think about when playing this deck in 2023. Guys, this again is a really fun build to play. Now that it's been hit, I find myself enjoying this as a goofy deck to just mess around with. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below, and as always, Logan JYA signing off. Have a great day, and I'll see all you beautiful people real soon. Peace.
意志逆走四角い空心の隙間